Hey, everybody, welcome to Big Blend Radio's first Friday Toast to the Arts and Park show with Nancy and Lisa. You know us, we are the crazy mother-daughter travel team on the Love of Parks tour, also publishers of Big Blend magazines. And, our first Friday Toast to the Arts and Park show is a big deal. We've been doing this for quite a few years. I think 6 or 7 or 8. I can't keep up. This is a show that we do with the National Parks Arts Foundation. They create these amazing opportunities for artists of all kinds, all genres, to apply to be an artist in residence in a national park unit. And when they get there, they're there for an entire month, which is pretty darn cool. We're talking places like Dry Tortugas National Park, where artists get their own island, Hawaii Volcanoes National Park, where you have this awesome house on the beach. It's like really cool. There's
That's
Chaco
cool.
Canyon up in northern New Mexico. There's been Gettysburg, we're going to say that, Death Valley, because we've got 2 photographers who did that. So anyway, we've been doing this for a while. So this year is our big anniversary year where we are celebrating 25 years of publishing Big Blend magazines, 15 years of Big Blend radio, and 10 years traveling on our Love Your Parks tour, where we document parks and public lands for our national park website, nationalparktraveling.com, and its magazine, Parks and Travel magazine. Gosh, that's a lot to say.
Yeah.
So anyway, we're doing all these reunion shows. We did one last month, and this month we are so excited we did a reunion show with Don Waters Baker and also Patricia Cummins last month, both oil painters. Patricia was in Fort Union up in New Mexico, and Don was over in Hawaii Volcanoes National Park. So today we're excited to bring 2 photographers on. We have Cody Brothers, who's based in Santa Fe, and when we first talked with him, he was in Death Valley National Park, and we also have Jim Schlett. And when he was on our show, I think, Cody, you were 2020, is that right?
Yes.
2020 in Death Valley, and then Jim, it was 2019 that you were in Gettysburg National Historical Park?
Actually, 2018.
2018.
Oh, wow.
I can't keep up, man.
I know.
But it's and the thing is, we travel full time, but both of you, amazing photographers. I want to give a shout out to your website and everyone. Cody Brothers, keep up with him at Cody Brothers. It's BROS, CodyBrothers.com. Is that right, Cody? Make sure we're all
Yes.
up to date.
Yeah, it's the abbreviation CODYBROS.
And you're in Santa Fe, and right now you're in your studio, right?
Yeah, I'm in where I do all the file setup. I'm right next to my darkroom.
Okay, and you've got a digital process where you're actually doing film. This is something that is hard to find, right? Where you're doing a
Right.
lot of that kind of processing.
I'm the only person left doing like black and white processing here in Santa Fe, and I think I'm the only one in New Mexico doing black and white dip and dunk processing.
Wow.
Huh.
And so do photographers mail stuff in, or do they actually come and
Oh, yeah.
see you? And
A lot of
Yeah.
a lot of the people that come and visit Santa Fe will mail stuff in once they leave, or they'll remember me and they'll mail stuff in. I also have several clients that work with big magazines that still shoot film and send
Wow.
it to me, and have for years.
That's
And
awesome.
I've got guys, like I said, that they'll come on vacation or the workshops. Santa Fe workshops used to be a big thing for film shooters before they went all digital, and a lot of them still send their film to me.
That's awesome. And Jim, you're in Virginia, right? So
Correct.
you're up in Virginia. So today we're in Washington State, so we're all over the country. I think this is great. We've got the East and West Coast represented, and we've got the Southwest. We love this. Jim's website is photomanva.zenfolio.com. Is that right, Jim? So it's been a few years.
Yeah, photomanva.zenfolio.com.
Okay, great. So let's start with both of you. I want to know, what is your very first camera? So tell us, what was your first camera, Jim?
Mine was a Polaroid camera gift from my father for about my, I want to say, 10th birthday. And I got hooked on photography then. I dragged him a couple of years later up to New York to actually buy a Minolta camera used for less than $100, 35 millimeter. And then I just started shooting away. Did the
There
high
you
school
go.
yearbook, newspaper, college, got very, very, I just always had a camera with me.
Wow. Well, and
Nice.
for you, Cody, what about you? What was your first camera?
Canon AE1, an old Canon AE1, like probably 1975, 76 model. My grandfather, he bought it for one when he retired for all of his travels that he had planned to do. And we were on a trip together, and he got so frustrated with it, he just basically handed it to me and said it was yours.
You mean like cell phones now? We just hand it to the younger generation and say,
Hey.
fix it.
Hey, Lisa, do you remember
sure.
your first camera?
Mine was a cardboard box that Nancy
Yes.
made for me because apparently I was clicking on everything when I did get my hands on the cameras that, processing film in Kenya as a kid was not
That was
exactly cost
A
effective.
process. So I
So-
gave her a little cereal box, took the wrapper off, and made a little thing for the lens and cut a little thing for like where you could look through. And she ran around the garden taking pictures.
And you still have them?
Yeah. Yes, of course. They're
course.
framed in our house that we don't live in. But
Yes.
there we go.
That was
But this is
funny.
amazing. So when you think about this journey, with the very original camera and things have changed so much, I think it's interesting. So Jim, you've had a career also in the postal service, and God bless the postal workers.
Yeah, really.
Seriously. It's hard
Yeah.
work, but how many
Mhm.
residencies, I know when we first connected, it was Gettysburg, but how many residencies have you done in national parks or parks? do you think?
I've done 10 now. I did one last year
Wow.
in New Mexico at Capulon. I was the first person they had down there as an artist in resident, and I was there for a month, and that was really special because it's a very small park, but you pretty much had run of the place by yourself. We got up to the
Wow.
top of the rim of the volcano at night for sunrise, the sunsets,
Oh,
and then in the
cool.
morning sunrises. It was, I can't say a bad word about any of the parks I've ever been at.
Oh, how can you? I mean,
No,
they're
you
all
can't.
amazing, right?
Mm-mm.
It's like
They
every
are.
time you do it, it's like pinch, it's like, this is so amazing.
Mm.
Cody, for you, how many have you done?
I've done Death Valley and Shenandoah.
Mm.
Yeah, and Shenandoah is your recent one, right?
I did that in October of 2020.
Okay.
Yeah. So when you go out, you pretty much go off and start hiking and backpacking and off into the wild.
I'm still all film, so it's you have to carry a lot of equipment and a lot of I shoot medium and large format, and so I'm carrying a lot of film and film holders as well. So
Mhm.
yeah, the older I've gotten, the more I've kind of done my research to know where I'm going and know how many cameras to take instead of trying to take them all.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
And is it the lenses or the different cameras? Because that's another thing, right?
Mm.
Well, I primarily shoot a panoramic camera and a 4.5 camera for my lens work for like the stuff that I do in the national parks is more lens based because I shoot a lot of pinhole stuff as well. And I have 4 different types of pinhole cameras that I take. And if I fully load my pack with every camera that I have, it's about 50 to 60 pounds. And then you throw a tripod on that top of that, getting up to around 70 pounds, and it gets kind of, you don't want to have to hike too far.
Right.
Right.
So you're not going to do the Appalachian Trail real soon like that?
Well, I did a lot of it. I did a whole lot of it while I was in Shenandoah, actually. Shenandoah,
Yeah.
the trail runs through it. So I was constantly on it. And
Mm.
the thing about Shenandoah, I was really surprised at the amount of hiking up and down that I had to get to certain locations like the waterfalls.
Mm.
Yeah, the strange thing about it is it's on the park's basically on a ridge line. So when you're going to overlooks, you're constantly hiking up. And when you're going to waterfalls and stuff like that, you're hiking down. So when you hike down, you got to get out. When you hike up, you got to come back down. So it was a lot more elevation change than I expected. But it was it was one of the most rewarding places I've ever gone.
Mm. You were in Death Valley before that too, when we first talked with you. And Death Valley is almost like, isn't it sea level or below sea level? So it's kind of a night and day difference.
Well, the thing about Death Valley, and this is what I tell it, because most people, when you talk about Death Valley, they're like, oh, you know, what, it's just, you know, Death Valley, isn't it just desert? And I always remind them, well, yeah, you're below sea level in places, but you can be up to 11,000 feet. And it is, you can go from below sea level to 11,000 feet in the same day. And that was, to me, the unbelievable thing about Death Valley is just the variety of what you could see and do there is just probably more amazing than any other park that I know of or have ever been.
Really? See, that's
it's a crazy place.
well, I love
It really is.
Place is the most crazy place I've ever been.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's
And
important that people go.
I've been to the volcanoes, and I mean, I've been all over the West, you know, all the national parks, most all the national parks in the West. But Death Valley just has that, I mean, that variety of truly, you can go from the desert to the plains to the mountains and, you know, back again all in one day.
Yeah.
And
It's
people need
amazing.
to understand that about the deserts and how special and magical they are. I think people sometimes just think they're just a big swath of sand, and there's so much more to a desert, and there's so much biodiversity, but you have to look, and you have to see it, you know, and get it. And Death Valley, it's sometimes really in your face, and then it's like, oh, look at this teeny little flower. You know what I mean? So it's, and just, it's fascinating, you know, and then people think, oh, it's always going to be hot there. So there's ways to work around that. So that's part of it also as a photographer, right? Is not be there at, you don't want to be there at high noon, or do you?
Well, not
in the summer.
But I mean, the greatest thing about it was the other thing people don't ever take into account about Death Valley is all the historic places. I mean, all the historic mines and you know, the old mining camps and the abandoned things left behind by all that. I mean, those things to me fascinate. I love photographing those things. So it was always like I made a point of being somewhere first thing in the morning at first light that I knew that I needed for first light, and then I would spend the middle of the day pretty much going in and looking for other places and historic sites and kind of the details within those mining sites and those mining camps and all that, and then be somewhere for the evening light, you know. And being there in January, like they do for the residency, it's just the best time to be there.
That's a good
It
time.
really never gets, I mean, at its hottest, it's usually right around, you know, the low to mid 80s. And then at its coldest, it'll get real cold at night. I camped out at the racetrack one night and it was about 20.
Whoa.
We've kind of done a little bit of that. It gets cold. That's cold. You know, and I just realized that lately that you have to look at the tag when you're buying a sleeping bag about the degrees it'll go to. You can't just buy any sleeping bag. There's a reason they put degrees on there. I've learned about this the hard way. You've got to get it right. But Jim, going over to you, when we first chatted with you, you were in Gettysburg, and that we've been to Gettysburg since, by the way, which is cool. And it was just such an, like I always use the word with it, an overwhelming experience going to Gettysburg. It was just literally we had to just go sit down and have a picnic and just look at the birds and calm down, because it's so just as a battlefield is, I don't know, it's overwhelming, the emotion side of it.
And it was when we went, it was extremely crowded, and some people instinctively show respect, and others walk over things they shouldn't walk over, you know, and that was kind of, you know, every time you saw that, you were like, oh man, come on, can you?
Right.
Dude.
Yeah, I mean, you have that, and that's probably the most crowded park, other than some of the real big ones in the West that I've been at. Especially on weekends in that visitor center. One of the days they had set up for me a table at the visitor center, which is very crowded on weekends. I mean, it's not uncommon to have 5 to 8,000 people go through that on a Saturday. And I set up a table with some easels and some of my photographs, and just, it was sort of a talk that was answering questions and answers about the artist in resident program. And in the span of 3 hours, my wife counted somewhere about 250 people came up to the desk to talk.
Oh my
So
God.
Wow.
a constant flow there. And most of the people who are in the visitor center, like you said, there are occasionally some knuckleheads, but most people understand what's happened on that battlefield. And especially if you're at the cemetery area, it's just,
Oh yeah, that's
we were there for, they had just started a program called the 100 Nights of Taps from Memorial Day to Labor Day, where every night in the cemetery at 7 o'clock, they play taps.
Oh, wow.
And the amount of people that would show up for it, and we happened to catch it when they closed it out on the last night, in which not only did they just have one bugler play taps, but they stationed about 25 around the whole circumference of the cemetery. And
Oh,
as
wow.
one person ended his playing of taps, another one picked it up, and then another one picked it up, and it
Oh,
went around
wow.
the whole cemetery. I mean,
Ooh.
it's just, we had goose pimples on.
Are you doing
on our
that to me
arms.
right now?
Yeah, I mean, it just really was amazing. And
Wow.
those are the kinds of things you saw there almost every day. And like Cody, I was up for first light. I'd get out, do some stuff, go back to the house or go to the visitor center. We'd go do some normal inside stuff during the day, and then in the evening be there for the last couple hours of light. And you'd meet some of the most interesting people. I talked about connections. Over the time I've been at some of the parks, and there we met a really interesting fellow at the visitor center. And he was in his normal volunteer uniform. And I asked him, I said, I've been to the park many times. Is there any unusual spots you'd go to? And he gave me a list of 3 or 4 things, asked who I was. And with that, I told him I was going to be there for a month. And he pulls out a business card, which is a postcard. And on the cover of it is a picture of Robert E. Lee in color. And
Uh-oh.
he shows it to me, and he's a living historian. And that's him in the picture, Robert E. Lee.
Oh wow.
And he gives talks, and he does the talks, as Robert E. Lee
Wow.
would do. He doesn't sugarcoat anything. And he basically said to me, he goes, I'm going to be giving a couple talks over the next few weeks. Here's my schedule. If you want to come to anything, just feel free to come to it. And we've developed a lifelong friendship now where he lives in Gettysburg. Believe it or not, Robert E. Lee lives in Gettysburg now.
Wow.
God.
And he is just the nicest individual my wife and I have met on these travels, 8 or 9
He is
people.
not Robert E. Lee though. So
He is not Robert E. Lee. He's actually a former high school history teacher and a principal at a high school.
Wow.
And he's just a great guy. That was one of, the experiences at Gettysburg. In addition to all of the normal stuff you do there, got to go down to the archives under the visitor center to see everything they have, which is a collection of over 1 million articles that's not on display up in the museum. And, they were extremely accessible about whatever you wanted to see. Just let us know. You can spend a couple hours down here. It just was really a unique experience. And I don't think anybody else other than an artist in residence gets the access you get to in this program.
And you have the time. I think it being a month-long program is also really good. And I think when you think about Death Valley, going back to you, Cody, on that, isn't that, having that time, because that park is really big. And if you're a tourist, a lot of times you'll just do like the scenic loop and that's it. But there's so much behind where you drive through, right? When you look at Death Valley.
Well, the greatest thing about the residency there is where they put you up at the lodge is right in the middle of the park. So it really enables you to say, okay, I'm going to go, over to Panamint Valley today, or I'm going to go, to Furnace Creek today, or I'm going to go up to the crater or out to the racetrack today. It enables you to, it keeps you from having to add that extra 45 minutes or hour on that if you were staying just on one side of the park or the other. I was lucky enough that I had done a grant there prior to the residency, so I was really familiar with the park, and that was one of the things when I wanted to do the residency, and when I was applying for it, I let them know I've got a real good idea of what I'm looking for and what I'm not going to have to like just run around all the time and look for
Mhm.
stuff, because I knew where things were, because Death
Mm.
Valley is so large that you can truly spend your day just driving around all day
Driving.
stuff, you
Yeah.
know. So
Yeah.
that was one of the great things about, I really had a great idea of, okay, hey, I want to do this week. Hey, I want to do this the next week. And the other thing too, um, that time of year, I was lucky enough on a couple of occasions to get really good rainstorms.
Oh,
And
that's
Mm.
cool.
it rains in Death Valley. There's nothing like it. I
Mm.
mean, out there in the marsh, and it fills up with water, and the reflections you get in the morning light and the late afternoon light of the mountains on all that water, you know, in the marsh is just those moments were, I mean, unlike
Mm.
anywhere I've ever been.
Mm.
And that's another great thing. When you're there for a month, that being able to cycle through all the weather and all the different changes,
Mm.
and you're there. And that's the whole thing about,
Mm.
if I go on a photo shoot and I scheduled to go out for a week like I did last year, in southern Utah or something, you're pretty much, when you're scheduled in, well, whatever the weather happens, you have to deal with it. If it's
Right.
weather good or
Yep.
bad. And like for the way I shoot with black and white and infrared, I'm largely dependent a lot on big skies and good clouds. And in Death Valley, you can be there for a week and never see a cloud.
Right.
Mm.
It's really true. It's really true.
And being there for 4.5, 5 weeks, you got the days where it was like, okay, hey, there's gonna be great clouds today. I want to go to this location because of it. There's days where, hey, the clouds aren't going to be as good today, or there's not going to be any. Well, I'll go to a mining location and shoot all the
Mm.
close-up stuff, that all the details of the mine or the camp or the abandoned cars that were left there or whatever like that. So it really gives you a lot more flexibility and leeway to plan your day and
Mm.
make the most of what you're capturing.
Yeah,
Mm.
because it's a once in a lifetime opportunity each time, I think, and how
Mhm.
we travel across the country, it's like get into a park and it is whatever you get in time wise is what you have. And
Yeah.
like recently we were out in Anacortes, Washington, and you're on the peninsula, and most of the time it's foggy, and I have to learn that okay, you just have to watch for the sunrise. You watch the clouds at night, but by morning it can be different. But I've had to learn, like, all of a sudden you're in the swamps of
Mhm.
Louisiana. There is no sunrise. Get over it. I'm waiting for the first light. The first light sometimes only
Mhm.
comes in the afternoon, depending on where you are. And it's like, I'm so used to the desert. Like, we used to live right out near Death Valley, Joshua Tree area. So, I'd be 4 a.m. is my time. I'm like, okay, it's time to start watching for it. It's coming.
Mm.
In a lot of places it isn't. Gettysburg is kind of like that, isn't it? With the first light can just mess with you with the fog.
Yes. Yeah, there's a lot of mist and fog that come over, but I
But that's
actually
cool.
yes, it is cool.
That's
My
cool.
wife couldn't get up those early hours, but I sure enjoyed them. And
Mm.
I was there in the early, mid-August, which is still pretty early to get up, but I'd be up by like 4:15, get to the site by 4:30, and then have 2 or 3 locations in mind. And you just see these beautiful mists running across the valley. And the other interesting thing there is Tanya had told me just
Shout out
before,
to Tanya Ortega, everybody,
yeah,
the founder of this amazing
Mm.
organization. Yeah.
yes, about 3 days before we were set to go there, she called me and she said, I just want to tell you something up front that we've had a couple artists tell us about this. And, one of the recent artists just brought it up again, and that is the house they put you in, which is directly on the road at Gettysburg. She goes, we've had some, reports of really weird things happening there.
Yep.
And she goes, I'm just going to leave it at that.
Well,
Of course, I didn't tell my wife that until
Oh.
after we were there about a week. But the last
Uh-oh.
week we were there, we really did experience some really unusual things. And they had
There was a blood on the wall, like you sent me photos. I
yes,
remember that.
yes. There was it was a plaster wall going to the outside of the house, and when you hit the wall, it was solid. It wasn't what you have here, drywall. And when we had first taken the house, there were these little tiny like air bubbles on it, and we had told the coordinator when you walk through the house, you know, what are the, she goes, we don't know. They just appeared a couple months ago. We're going to have somebody come out and take a look at it. And they were like that the whole time we were there. About 3 days before we were leaving, I get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and I'm walking down the stairs. My wife is still asleep. And the air bubbles now are red and there's
Ooh.
streaks of red running down the entire wall.
I think that's so cool.
It
See,
was, I can just tell you, it was weird.
It-
We had taken pictures of them. We showed them to us to the coordinator for the park, and she said, we'll have somebody come out there and look at it. You know, you're kind of not the first person that's ever brought some weird stuff coming up out of that house, but
Oh, we
but
saw
you
that
see,
house too.
and
Yeah.
all that mist, it's really not mist. It's
Oh.
previous people from the
Stop it,
battlefield.
Nancy. But
No,
why
it's
not?
it's true.
Well,
actually in that house, afterwards, I had looked up a lot of information about that house, and what was very
Yeah.
interesting.
the
was
Klingel
right in the
house, right? It's a Klingel house.
It's the
Mm.
Klingel house. It was actually there during the war. It was a
See?
farmhouse. And during the battle, the guy had evacuated under Union orders. This is not a good place to be. When he comes back to the house several days after the battle is over and the troops have left, not only are there dead people, dead soldiers still on his property, there's a couple of
Wow.
dead soldiers in the house.
Yo.
No, dude.
So maybe it's all related, but that's one thing that clearly stood out in my mind about
Yeah,
that
I
residence.
bet.
Wow.
That's creepy.
Well, okay, so Cody,
But I'd go
anything
back
weird? And
tomorrow.
I mean, he's in Death Valley, so I mean, you know,
Yeah,
that,
nice
I mean,
name.
that's, I mean, we got to go from the blood on the walls to the Death Valley. I mean, is there some? Did you get
Well,
any
the
vibes
weird-
out there?
The weirdest thing in Death Valley that, and it happened during the residency, but it's happened in other times that I've been there, are the big sandstorms.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was there, the last week I was there, it was actually right after the Super Bowl, because I was there when the Super Bowl was on, and this huge dust storm came that night of the Super Bowl, and I was sleeping.
Said it, I want to be the Super Bowl.
Well, I was sleeping, and it sounded like
Mm.
like I was at LAX. The airplanes were landing right above me, and I creaked open the door, and it was a sandstorm hitting us, and it had knocked out the tower, so we had no power.
Oh,
So I was
Oopsie.
3 days without power.
mm.
And the first day and a half, you couldn't go out because the sandstorm was so bad that it was useless
Mhm.
trying to get to the car to go anywhere. And then once it was still pretty bad, and I decided, well, I'm going to drive out and see if I can drive out of it and go up into the mountains and actually photograph. And that was on. The sandstorm came in on Sunday night, and it was Tuesday that I finally tried. I ventured out, and once I got it out, you know, up in the mountains and could look back down on the valley was just, you know, a big cloud of sand.
Mm-hmm.
But to see those sandstorms come in is one of the most amazing, and the sound of that was. I mean, it sounded like, you know, almost like a tornado.
Mm.
Or like I said, like a jet was landing on the hotel, basically.
That's crazy.
Oh my God. You know,
Mhm.
but that Nancy, didn't you get stuck in a sandstorm there?
Yeah, my friend Yvonne and I, she's also a photographer, and we were in the Death Valley area, and we decided that we would sleep overnight in the car. Well, in the morning, we heard like knock, knock, knock on the window of the car, and the park rangers were like there with shovels to dig us out. We were almost halfway buried in the
Wow.
sand because we couldn't get out. Once we
Mhm.
were,
Right,
you know,
right.
we couldn't get out. So we're like, what do we do? And this is before cell phones. I'm not trying to date myself, but it was
Right.
This is in
before
the 70s,
cell
y'all.
phones. So we just like just went to sleep in the car. And we were really lucky that they found us and came and dug us out. But we're
Park
like,
rangers are amazing. They know
yeah.
what's going on in the
And
park.
they
Don't
didn't get
think they
mad at
don't.
us. They
Mhm.
really, they just said, be a little more careful next time.
Mm.
Right. Well, Nancy, now you know when we just got stuck in the car the other day.
I know.
We couldn't open our car doors. We were driving. We got to Salina. We drove from Natchitoches, Louisiana to Salina, Texas, right above Dallas. And there was this huge storm going on. And we knew there was, and talk about watching light, you know,
Mm.
traveling, you have to watch like, okay, snow's hitting. You don't want to
Everything.
be at this point. You don't want to hit this ice. But I drove over ice for 4 hours, fresh ice to Dallas area. We get to the place we're going and we go to get out of the car. We're iced in. The whole car was encased with ice.
We
So that's
couldn't
your
open
second
the
time
door.
then. You can't open the door. That's
Wow.
a crazy. It's just crazy, but that's part of that travel. And I think again, when you have that 1 month, it is so you
Mm.
can handle situations that come up because you have extra time, but at the same time you're witnessing, though I think it's amazing that you went through the sandstorm, and I think it's
Mhm.
amazing that you had blood on the walls, if it was blood,
That,
you know.
but
It's
that's really creepy.
but you know, it
That's
could be
creepy.
something that just, I don't know, decided it's the way it is. But right now, you know, the National Parks Arts Foundation, and everyone, nationalparksartsfoundation.org is the website, has, you know, artist residency opportunities for Hawaii Volcanoes National Park, Haleakala, both in Hawaii. There's Death Valley, of course. There's Dry Tortugas, Chaco Canyon. Have you been looking at other ones that you would want to apply for? Either one of you?
I applied last year for the Tortugas, and I was the finalist, and they ended up wanting to take someone from Florida, but we were
Oh, yeah, that was a different thing. Yeah.
but we were finalists for it, and I'm really interested in doing that just because, I mean, the opportunity to stay out there, I mean, and actually stay there because that's it, and it's so remote, and I just think that would be great. Gettysburg's on my list. I really think that for a certain type of the way I shoot, it would really work. And I have I'm big into military history. I went to military
Oh.
school in high school.
Oh,
and then-
yeah. Wow.
So I have a real knowledge of military history. So I have a real interest to go there. I'm getting ready to apply for the volcanoes one.
Oh, that's
So-
awesome too.
That's cool,
That'd be
too.
great. Well, I think Gettysburg is interesting too. You know, all the sculptures, you know, all those statues. I mean, there's and I know you take a lot of those photos, Jim, and in the cannons and everything. There's something about photographing sculptures. It's like photographing art on art. And then you've got Mother Nature, who's her own art form, you know, so there's this triple effect when you're doing it. It's 3 art forms merging. And when you get light in black and white or color, it's there's just a magic to it, you know, and you
Yep.
have to get the lighting right. You know,
Yeah.
I didn't get my lighting right
It's all
recently in
about the light.
Anacortes, but I only had what I had, you know,
Right.
then you over process everything. It's like, then you get so stuck and, you know, you've got to get the light right. It's all about it, right?
The lighting is everything in art.
Mhm.
It really
Right.
is.
Yeah,
Mhm.
for
I
sure.
think-
That,
Yeah, it's
Mhm.
and you need that time to get the light right. Whether you're a
Mhm.
painter or, you know, a photographer, anybody who's in the visual arts, you need the light right. But
The light has got to be right.
Cody, I really, really hope that you go to Dry Tortugas because I think it would be, you'll have the clouds, they do come in and out, and you will have your sand and turtles. And turtles. I mean, it would just be this whole other thing. But what about you, Jim? Is there any that you're eyeing to apply for?
I've actually applied to a couple that are not with the National Art Foundation group. Some of them are still very slow of getting back into the cycle because of COVID.
Of course. Yeah.
Some of them are like, well, we have tentative plans, but we haven't made a decision. So I have 3 or 4 out there now, but I haven't heard back from any of them. And most of them, the residencies occur in the fall season. So I'm hopeful that one of them will open up.
Now, would you do like Chaco, since you've been in New Mexico now? Like Chaco would be awesome. I want to go camp in Chaco,
You'll
but I
have to
don't know if I
have
want to
both.
actually camp there because I know there's snakes.
There's
I know the
ghosts
rattlesnakes are out there, man.
and there's ghosts.
But there's,
They're in the cave dwellings. The ghosts are all up there.
yeah.
They're in the cave
But
dwellings.
I think Chaco would be so cool. You've been to Chaco? Obviously, you're in Santa Fe, Cody. That's
Oh,
gotta.
it was part of the grant I did for the Centennial of the National Parks. I was awarded an NEA grant for the Centennial of the National Parks, and that was one of the parks that they chose for me to do. That and Fort Union and Great
Oh,
Basin,
cool.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Great Basin and Death Valley, and Chaco is it's something.
Yeah.
It's another place all into itself. I love Chaco. I was born in Farmington, which is just
Oh,
north.
okay.
Oh, wow.
Oh, cool.
I've been there so many times, and in fact, I was just there not too long ago. I'm planning on going there at the end of the month. I go there I take a lot of people out there, and I know it really well.
Cool.
I've hiked all over it and seen some pretty weird stuff out there.
I know, man. There's just a vibe.
There's weird
I don't
stuff
know.
out there.
Can I just say it's
It's
otherworldly?
strange. It can
It's
be
a
It's
strange.
celestial. It's celestial. No matter how you look at it, it's
Oh,
celestial,
yeah.
right?
There's a big time spirit,
Mm-hmm.
feel of spirit out there, and
Yep.
camping out there, you really get, you feel it. And going on the ranger hikes, like the full moon hikes and stuff like that, being out there at night and the full moon coming up, and it's a special place.
It
Did
is.
you wear boots for snakes? I've just got to ask because with all the rockery, whenever I see a bunch of rocks, right, no matter if it's human formations or there, to me, I know there's those little babies are in there.
Yeah.
They are.
I've seen
And they're
I've
waiting for you.
snakes.
Mhm.
I've
Yes.
seen snakes out there, but I've seen more at Fort Union.
Oh yeah,
Oh.
yeah.
At Fort Union and Mesa Verde. I've seen Mesa Verde. I've seen
Mm.
probably more than anywhere. Bandolier as well. They like hiding in the rock walls.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
boy.
Yeah.
I just the most recent snake encounter we had was a cottonmouth in Okefenokee Swamp.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, look at that. And I thought, oh, rattlesnake. My immediate mind went rattlesnake because of his face. And I'm like going through all the snakes in my head. And, while you're doing that, and I'm trying to get a photo as I started getting closer, I'm like, you need a different lens. You need a different lens for this. You don't want to get closer because he's all like, dude, hello, I'm coming to see you. And I'm going to get closer. I'm like, what are you doing? And then it took me a while to figure.
Those cottonmouths are aggressive too.
And
Yeah,
no
they
kidding,
are.
because he was like, hello, I'm coming to see
Well,
you. And Nancy's like, I can't see it. And we're right there.
I know.
And I'm
We're
like,
so
you
stupid
need to not
sometimes.
look at it right now. But,
We just
but
want to, I want to see. I want to see.
I
But
find
what was
snakes
the
everywhere.
rock rattler or whatever in Saguaro
That is
Park?
Saguaro National Park.
That was
He
bad.
went right over my feet. And then
And
we've had
he
enough
kind
snake
of-
encounters. I don't want to
he-
scare people.
No, but he kind of trapped us in one of those little places
a
where
little Ramada thing.
the
a little
Ramada,
picnic
where
Ramada.
it's a little picnic bench, and you've got a cover like a roof on there, and you can see out over this beautiful valley. And he or she had made his burrow under the cement portion, so there was a little hole there, and so it was going to go down the hole, but then it saw us in there, and we're having some refreshment, and then he comes, and we're like, oh, now this is not good, because
He
I don't
trapped
want to
us.
turn my back on a snake, not a rattler, but the only way out was through the window, and you had to climb on the bench to go out the window and turn your back on the snake. So we're like, uh-oh.
We did. We bailed that through the window, but
So we had to very softly, slowly climb out the window, and then he goes around the other side when you're going down the hill. He's like, "Hi, I'm still here." You know, like, ah. So we got down to the car, and these people on their way up, and we're like, "Don't go up there. There's a rattler, and he's a little bit aggressive." And they were like, "Oh, so what?" And they kept going, so we had to call the park ranger, and the park ranger came and sorted it out. But That was
But
one scary time,
the snake, actually we had to call the
but he
park
was
ranger because my
really
battery went
pretty.
dead. The battery in my car went dead.
Yeah, I
And
know.
there
We're
was
like,
another rattlesnake right by the car. But
yeah, and they do. And I know this about rattlers. They always have a mate. They travel in
Mhm.
twos. So when you see one, there's another one. In
Someone's
fact, a
out
lot
there.
of snakes do that at certain times of the year. They travel in twos. So when you see one, better watch your step because there's
Jim,
another
did you
one
ever
right
see
around the
them
corner.
in the graveyard area at Gettysburg or in the graveyard? Because we always find them in graveyards.
I have
I think I
not
always
had the
find them.
opportunity there, but last year when we
Mm.
were in Capuan, we went down to Fort Union and they had closed off two of those underground areas where
Mm.
rattlesnakes were seen that morning, and they had closed them off that day.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. So Fort Union. Wow.
Yeah.
And what about in Death Valley? I've never seen
Oh,
a
there's
snake there.
snakes in there. There's snakes there.
Did you see any snakes when you go hiking out there? Because you go way out.
I didn't see it. I didn't see any snakes, and a lot of it probably was. I don't know if it was the time of year I was there. Out at the
Oh, yeah,
race,
January.
out at the racetrack and in the dunes, sometimes you would see their trails.
Oh,
I've seen the trails of them in the dunes, in Mesquite Dunes and the Panamint Dunes there.
cool.
I've never come across one there. Like I said, it's almost guaranteed Mesa Verde, Fort Union, Pecos National Monument, anything where there's a stone or rock wall where they can get in the shade, and
Yeah.
that's where I see them the most. And I really pay attention to when out of Chaco, you have to be careful when you take the trail up through the crevasse to overlook Pueblo Bonito and go up to Pueblo Alto. You step on a lot of rocks going up through that crevasse, and I always worry about them up through there.
Yeah.
because-
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
don't want
yeah.
to scare people, but I think, it's something they are to be respected and they are part
And
of
they're
the experience.
beautiful.
I
They're
mean,
beautiful.
if you're going to be a photographer or an artist getting out there, I
have
think
to-
isn't part of the experience of being an artist in residence or just an artist getting out there into nature that you've got to take it all in. You've got to kind of be one with the land and the natural environment. And if you're scared of snakes, you're just going to have to kind of get over it. You know what I mean? I don't want to make light of it, but you know what I mean?
Well,
You
I
have to
take a
have.
snake bite kit. I always have a snake bite kit with.
Oh, okay.
I mean, you can buy a snake bite kit at the drugstore for cheap and just keep it, and they're small, and you just keep it in your camera bag just in case.
Oh, that's a good
Oh,
idea.
see, that's a good.
Lisa.
Don't try to play tourniquet. That doesn't
I
work.
do wear leather boots, that high top leather boots, hiking boots, and it's. You just have to keep your eyes out for them. Another thing too that I always do is wear something that jingles. Wear something on myself that
Makes
makes
noise.
and jingles, and it seems to let them know that you're coming.
Any tips from you, Jim? Not necessarily on snakes, but
Well, actually, we've encountered some bears over the years.
Cool.
We've had them in the Shenandoah. We've had them at
Nice.
Ski Town National Recreation Area, and even at Capuan. One night we were up on the rim, and the rangers were telling us, "Oh, it's very rare we ever get bears up at the top of the rim here." And we were up there by ourselves just before sunset. And my wife's looking ahead as we went on the rim, and she goes, "There's a bear about 30 yards in front of us." And sure enough, by the time I got up, I could just see him glimpsing. He looked at us and headed way down one of the side pockets of the inside of the rim there. And, we've come across them. We've been, like Cody said, we generally, one of us has something on that rings or it's a bell. We've been at Glacier one year where they actually had closed off a trail where they put a sign across the trail saying, "This trail is closed. Grizzly bear sighting in the last 3 days, several grizzly bear sightings in the last 3 days." And of course, my wife going out with me on these trips, she goes, "Well, do you think that means us? We can't go any further forward on this trail?" I said, "Absolutely." We're not that brave for a photograph.
Yeah. You know, we encountered them in Sequoia and Kings
Mm.
Canyon National Parks, and Sequoia was
That
fall.
was great.
We're hiking through Paradise, a meadow out there is just incredible. And
Mm.
I love it out there. I could live in the little
Mm.
marsh and
Yeah.
be quite happy. But we're out there, and we've been through there every time we're there, there's always these little baby deer. And it's like the same family is reproducing. And it's just like every time you're there, there's like a certain, you
Mm.
get to know them, and we were hiking, and all of a sudden we're hearing all of this, crashing and major loud scratching. Like, what is this? What is this sound? It's not a bird. What is it? Well, what we didn't know is bears at that time were scratching all the dead wood, all this dead sequoia trees and
bark.
pine trees, and getting the grubs out of the bark and
Mm.
eating them,
Oh,
because
right.
now they're getting ready for hibernation. And we're like, oh, dude, and trees would come down if they were messing with them because they're so big. But we came across a mama bear with a couple of cubs,
And we're like,
and we're like,
uh-oh.
oopsie. But they
Right.
went away from us. They went away from us, which
Yeah.
I think, we were really lucky. And you don't want to be one of those on the news going,
Yeah.
hello,
Mm.
let me play with the elk.
Right.
We've seen
Right.
people in Smoky Mountain National Park getting right up to the elk and their
Trying to
babies.
feed the elk and
Like,
Right,
all
stop
that
right.
kind of thing.
Stop
It's-
it. There's a respect. I think that's something beautiful about photography is your work goes all over the world. When you go and have your displays, when people purchase it, people get to have these experiences. Like, how many people are going to go hike in the places that you do? Not as many, right? And so you're able to share it, and maybe they'll never get to the parks that you're in, but they get to this healthy respect from each of you.
Mm.
With your art, what is your goal as photographers? What do you want the audience? Is it, what do you want to happen when someone connects with your photography? Let's start with you, Jim.
Actually, I just like people to enjoy the work. When I've had some shows, I've had people come up and say, I've been to those same places and my pictures don't look anything like yours. And what surprised me is a couple people actually came back to me several years ago. I got a unique deal to a woman had an apartment in Paris, believe it or not. And she said, I've turned it into an Airbnb. I can't get people to go out there. She goes, if you can get to Paris, I'll give it to you free for 10 days if you take pictures for my website.
Well,
I said, well, this sounds like a great deal. So I went
Yeah.
out there and took the pictures. And she told me afterwards, she goes, I know it sounds crazy. She goes, but like my bookings have increased by like 35% since you
awesome.
Added that stuff. And another woman who bought one of my pictures from the same trip, she had seen the pictures on my Facebook page, and she says, and she was in her late 70s. She said something to the effect, I've always wanted to go to Paris. I saw your pictures, and because of your pictures, I bought a plane ticket to go to see Paris.
That's magic, man. That's awesome.
yeah.
That's
Yeah.
very
That
cool.
is magic, man.
But I mean,
That's what I
that's
felt
and
like
this
when I
isn't
took-
Paris in Texas, right? This is Paris, France.
That is correct.
Listen, I still want to sleep in Paris, Texas. We camped right outside there, but I have a thing about, it's a Rycooter thing. Anyway, I know I'm weird, but listen, if you listen to Rycooter music, you'll get it. But anyway,
Okay.
listen, everybody needs to listen to Rycooter. He's one of the best and most important musicians on the planet.
yeah.
He really is. He is. He's
Okay, groupie.
he should be an artist in residence. I would love to see what he does going if he went to parks and
Mm.
he would be able to take the cultural music, like if you went to Hawaii,
Oh yeah.
if
yeah, for
Death
sure.
Valley, even, dude, you know what?
Mm.
Anyway, I won't do that. Cody, what about you and your photography? We need to close this with the right Cooter song now. Sorry, I can't. But I have to pay a lot of money for that.
Well, part of what inspired me as a kid to shoot photographs was the images I saw from Ansel Adams and Paul Strand and all the greats of the national parks. And those were the things that I would show my grandfather and say, well, I want to go there because of that photograph. Well, I want to see that place because of that photograph. And that's part of the whole thing of the inspiration for me to shoot in the national parks, and why I do so much of it is a lot of people have no idea what's out there.
Exactly.
I mean, they really don't. And if you can inspire more people to see more of these places, the more chance that we're going to have of saving them
Exactly.
and conserving them.
Mm-hmm.
And especially inspiring young people to do it and see those places, because that's one of the things too of, I mean, that's why we went as kids to the places that I got to go and see. And I think that it's, kind of the future generations, it's important to inspire people to go and see these places so they know how important they are to conserve, to protect,
Mm-hmm.
and to keep for. One of the things I truly believe is I feel that our national parks service and our national parks are probably the jewel of our country. I think
Mm-hmm.
it is.
Absolutely.
It is I mean, you can go all over the world and there's no other place that has as many different national parks and is grand and is big and sought after by tourists all over the world as our country. And I think it's one of the greatest things that we have, or one of our greatest assets.
Well, it's especially now when we think of this year, Yellowstone celebrates 150 years, and that was our very first, and Yellowstone, Yosemite, you've got to think about this is so, they started something. And as we travel, we do all parks now, not just National Park Service units, but there's a lot of parks that I want to see elevated to National Park Service just for the
Yes.
high protection
Yes.
standards, and
Mhm.
it's so important because we also, I know that you're both into history, but every national park, Death Valley, Yellowstone, all of the Everglades, right? Dry Tortugas, each of them not only are protecting the natural landscape that we need to have for the indigenous species, the native species of animals and plants, but they're also protecting the history and preserving the cultural legacies. I think that's so important. I've never been to a park on this planet that didn't have some part of history that we're also saving. And it's a really important thing. It's a living museum in a way when you
No
go there,
question.
it's so important. But for both of you going into the residencies that you have, what has changed for you on a personal level when you go into these parks? Because, I know you travel with your wife and you guys, you're not always all alone, but there is something very personal when you're taking a shot, you're in a zone, there's a focus. Is there something when you come out of those residencies or while you're there that changes you as an individual? With you, Jeb, I've seen you're like, yes. Something changed for you each
Yeah,
time?
I think in each of the parks I've been at, and over the years, we've kind of counted up. We have one of those passport books. We've been to about 175 different national park sites over the years. There's
Awesome.
almost a connection from one park to another about something in history. I do a lot of reading that, there's
Yep.
something I've read in Gettysburg where, I've been to a presidential museum out in California that there's a connection, believe it or not, with Gettysburg with Richard Nixon. When you're in the cemetery, you find out Richard Nixon's grandfather was killed there. And, everywhere I've gone, I've seen these connections that seem remote at first. And, it's just like this 6 degrees of connections that somewhere in that park with something else you do or somebody else we meet. And a lot of times with the parks itself, when we met so many of the rangers, some of the rangers like at Shenandoah got their start at Sequoia National Park, which we've been to. We've heard so many interesting stories from the rangers themselves about how they got started, where they wound up, 8 or 9 different parks, which is their favorites. Those kind of connections with the national parks, I feel like each time we came back, we sort of sit down, and even before we go through the pictures, we just sort of take a night to just reflect on what an amazing time we just had at that park. And, it's, like those commercials say, it's sort of priceless.
Yeah, it's
even
true.
that
Mhm.
connection, like you're just saying, when you were talking about taps in Gettysburg, this is the wildest thing. We went to Gettysburg, and then it was the same year, a couple months later, we ended up in Erie, Pennsylvania, and they have Presque Isle State Park, which is one of the places I think should be a national park.
Yeah, that's
Really.
beautiful.
But anyway, so they have the Hagen House. It's a historical museum, and then the Hagen History Center. You've got to go there. It's incredible. They have a mansion on there, the William Curtsey Mansion. I'm not going to get the names right. But while we were there, we're going through, they have such multicultural history of every country, all the people that came there because of the Industrial Revolution.
Mhm.
So
Right.
you go in this place and it's like, oh my gosh, it's like sometimes you need to start at these places to understand where you're walking through,
Mhm.
all the different cultures and what they brought to Erie, Pennsylvania, and who was working. And then you see a whole exhibit on waffle irons, because cast iron, apparently that's, we all have waffles and cast iron, but they started there, thanks to the railroad. But anyway, we get into a whole room that they dedicated to the Civil War. And we just come, from Gettysburg, and
Yes.
they had a display of the notes of taps being written,
Uh-huh.
and one of the resident, families, one of the soldiers that had been at Gettysburg and other places. I'm going to get it wrong, but I'm not going to say where he fought or what he did, but he was one of the soldiers that wrote or co-wrote taps, and so we did a whole radio segment on it. Yeah, and so it's just.
Butterfield?
I think so.
Yeah.
I'll send you the link. We did a podcast on it.
Mm.
I just
Actually, I believe at Gettysburg, he was the chief of staff for Meade for a short while he was there, I think.
Wow.
Mm.
Okay, I'm gonna have to look it up, because that's the thing. Everywhere we go, we're finding those
There's a
connections,
connection.
and we're
Yes.
like, "Holy cow, this is weird! It's weird."
Mhm.
And there's
Right.
weird stories that are connected too.
Yeah.
There's a lot of weird
Mhm.
stuff that happens where it is a small world, even though we're just this little speck,
But
And by the
everybody,
way,
everything's connected in some way. If you search long enough, you'll find it.
Mhm.
But so it's like you can't do this over there without it doing something over there. It's
that's because the
how it
world
is.
is round. It is not flat.
Yes.
It wouldn't work if it was flat, people. And if you go to national parks, you'll find out the world is round. I just want to say that.
Are you sure?
Cody, for you, tell us about any
Oh my
changes for
gosh.
you. How parks and being a resident in parks, how's it moved you personally?
Well, the biggest thing to me is from more like an artist standpoint
Mm.
of adapting to like I was the artist in residence there at Death Valley in January, and then in Shenandoah in October of the same year. And you can't, I mean, two completely different ways of capturing images. I mean, in that, from an artist standpoint, it's a challenge.
Yeah.
It challenges you and
Mm.
it makes you reach out and go, okay, I have to do this differently.
Yeah.
God, and you're doing
I have
film, of course.
different,
Yeah.
God.
You got to stretch.
and it makes you a better artist. And
Yeah.
that's the biggest thing of, and why I can't wait to do another one. And it really expanded it made me look at things differently, shoot differently in different situations, and just attack it differently, because I'm very much a feel person. I get in that kind of natural rhythm of a place and kind of try to really tune into that and convey that through what I'm trying to capture. And like I said, it was probably the most drastic switch of locations and that feeling from what I was doing January and February in Death Valley, and then what I had to do in October at Shenandoah. And when I came out of it and knew that I had accomplished it, and it was just this great feeling of, wow, I could do anything. I could go anywhere and adapt to those circumstances and produce, because that was part of the reason why I wanted to do Shenandoah. I wanted to do something that was so different from what I'm used to here out in the West, with the big horizon lines and big skies and the desert and stuff like that, to where it was much more, you're in a canopy all the time. You're under the canopy of trees, and the challenge of trying to capture autumn with black and white photography in Shenandoah. Here you have the leaves all changing colors. Well, how are you going to capture that black and white? How are you going to make it look different and unique? And those are the challenge. That's why I'm intrigued by the idea of going to Dry Tortugas. So why I'm intrigued by the idea of going to Gettysburg.
Yeah, Gettysburg, Dry Tortugas. Gettysburg's a trip, man.
Yeah,
Dry
Gettysburg.
Tortugas, I think Dry Tortugas has to be the #1 most unique artist residency in a national park in the world, really. Like, because you're so off, you're off on your own island. You have to take someone with you, and it's just,
You don't get any internet.
yeah, I think being off grid has got to be the most amazing thing, to not have beep beep on your phone and, all of that stuff. It's like a great escape, and you have to think about what food you're taking for a month. I'm going to go, how much wine can I take on the boat? I don't know, I'll be in
And
trouble.
they'll be saying, no, there's no room for wine,
I
only
know,
food.
but
And you're like, oh,
really,
no.
it's I think it's one of the most unique. Down in Hawaii, volcanoes, it's got to be there too. But Dry Tortugas has to be at the top of the list of residency programs in the world. I don't know. Maybe we'll ask Tanya to add the ice hotel, wherever that is. That there's that ice hotel people can go sleep in. Would you do an artist residency in snow and ice?
Would you sleep in it?
Why not? Yeah.
Your bed's made out of ice.
Yeah.
No thanks.
Yeah.
I think I could pass on that one.
You guys, thank you so much. What a cool conversation. And it's great to hear what you're up to. And so what is next for you in the next 6 months? What's going on? What's happening for each of you?
Well, I'm applying for a couple of the residencies through the MPAF, the Hawaii ones for next year. I'm waiting on their deadline to see what they're going to do for Chaco. I'm really interested in doing Chaco because I know it so well, and to be up there and be able to stay there again. I love the idea of doing these residencies in places that I really know well, because you're going to get that much more. You're just going to get that much more to work done. I'm always going. I'm always going somewhere. I do workshops here with tourists that come in. I just did a workshop up in Abiquiu for a group of tourists that came in. They came in from Atlanta this past week. So I'm always going out to Chaco. So I'm always going somewhere.
So everyone, CodyBrothers.com, and that's BROS, Cody Bros. There it is. He's the bros, man. CodyBros.com. And then Jim, for you, what's next in the next 6 months or so?
Well, like Cody, I have a couple applications out there and I have my fingers crossed on them. But my wife said this year she'd like a real vacation. So I've got her thinking about where would you actually like to go for 2 weeks where you don't have to worry about fixing up a cabin or getting those kind of things in order. Because when we go, she takes a big role in doing that, helping me out with the workshops, that kind of stuff. So I've got her with some travel magazines. I think she's still a little weary about going overseas. So I think it's going to be someplace in the United States. And we're talking about like anywhere from 14 to 20 days, just getting away and taking photographs and doing that kind of stuff. And then hopefully in the meantime, I'll get an acceptance someplace at one of the parks.
And that's really, before you guys go, the application thing, you're both great at what you do. And both of you have amazing work and have amazing experience behind it. So it's like, you think, oh, your application in, just boom, but there is competition, and it's not just competition necessarily. It's just there's a jury that looks at them, and it's just the way it is. And so when you get the no, it sucks, right? We all go through the no's.
Yeah.
You have to just go, okay, that means another door's opening. Do you have to kind of go, okay, give, like,
Yeah.
that process sucks.
Carry
though.
on. Carry
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
And I always want to talk about this because I don't want artists to go, oh, I tried and I didn't get accepted, so that's it. I want-
Well, I always try to, the way I deal with it is, if I'm applying for a residency at a certain period of time, I just make sure that space of time, if I don't get it, I'm going somewhere.
Oh,
I'll,
good one.
Mhm.
I'll take the opportunity. Like, I applied for the Tortugas and didn't get it, and ended up, I was already figuring on, well, I'm going to be gone that whole time. So instead, I ended up doing all of Southern Utah, Grand Escalante,
See?
Oh,
and-
beautiful.
and Bears Ears. I was out of Bears Ears
Oh, cool.
for a while.
Wow.
It did all, it made the big loop through Southern Bryce and all that.
Hmm.
And I make sure that if I'm applying for something and it's not going to come through, well, I'm going somewhere for that time and making the most use of it.
Oh, I love that. That
Mm.
makes sense. And it feels good no matter what then. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And-
Well, I mean, you're out there, you're working, you're
Yeah.
doing the work, and you're I mean, the only way you grow and I'm sure Jim's going to say the same thing. The only way you grow doing this is to keep doing it and keep putting yourself.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, it just doesn't happen, and
Mhm.
that's why, even if it's, I go out and shoot almost every weekend, and pretty much diligently Saturday and Sunday I take off from work, make sure I'm not working, and I go find something, and I go and shoot. Whether it's going and hunting down ghost towns all over New Mexico,
Cool.
or
Speaking about ghosts.
so much ghost town stuff, and it's like I'll go out and do that for a day,
Mm.
but it's the only way that you just keep building and growing and working on your craft.
I agree. Jim,
Mm.
from you, when you get the purple stamp, what do you do?
I've gotten a lot of them. And I've actually wound up, people have tracked me down who have applied to some of the artist in resident programs. And they
Mm.
generally say, look, I've seen you've been at a couple. Can you give me some hints? And I'm getting so discouraged because I've been turned down twice.
Mm.
And I
Oh.
said, only twice?
Yeah.
Mm.
You're doing pretty good so far. And actually, one of the women who's a poet from Connecticut just got accepted. Actually, she got accepted at Gettysburg, and then the pandemic started, so they have her on hold. And she later called me saying, thanks so much. If you hadn't told me be persistent, I would have given up. And that's what I tell people. And I've given presentations in the Virginia, Washington, D.C. area about the program, and people think, well, all I have to do is apply. And I said, there's a lot of applications. And one year when I applied to Glacier, they had told me for 3 positions, they had 297 applications.
Yeah. Of course.
So I know when I put an application in, even if your work is really, really good, there's a good chance you're not going to get selected that year. So
Yeah.
just persistence pays off.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I agree. It's with anything in
Mhm.
life, right? You
Right.
follow your passion. If you're
Mhm.
passionate, we're here. We may come back, but in the meantime, we might as well do what we want to do here.
Yes.
If you're
Absolutely.
not harming anything. That's the thing.
If you come back, you could go hang out in Gettysburg. It's cool.
Yeah, I love that. And listen, Gettysburg is a trip, man. It really
That's
is.
a trip.
It is a trip. So everyone, again, Jim's website is Photomanva, or Photoman VA. I just call him Photomanva. I always see Photomanva, sorry. .zenfolio.com. So you can keep up with him there. And of course, the National Parks Arts Foundation is nationalparksartsfoundation.org. And we host shows every first Friday, our Toast to the Arts and Park show, where we interview artists in residence. And this is one of them. So stay tuned. We have a third one coming up, one of these artist reunion conversations coming up for our May episode. So thank you both for joining us.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
It's been a
Thank
pleasure.
you.
Good
Thanks.
seeing you again.
And happy
Good seeing
snapping.
you. Yes.
Right.